Good morning, everybody. This is Morgan Denny coming to you live from Portland, Oregon on the PT on Ice Daily Show. Today we are going to talk about depression, a lively subject, but one that I think is really, really important within our profession for patient care. So as many of you may have noticed, you may have patients coming in with depression. Depression is not a mental health concern that's going away. In fact, if you are like me, you're noticing that a lot of your patient population is coming in with this marked on their chart. Depression and anxiety, definitely something that's increasing in our population. And whether or not it's because of an increased awareness or actually an increased incidence of depression, I am uncertain. But I think because it is increasing in our population, we as PTs are going to have to deal with it more and more commonly. So it's important that we really have kind of a handle on what to do in these cases and how we can really be true advocates to these patients. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about some different kinds of depression and some different strategies you can use to help your patients and that you can use as a clinician to leave you feeling more empowered and less like you can't do anything to help this person because they have a mental health concern that's outside of your realm. So depression kind of comes in a lot of forms, right? And as PTs, depression tends to coincide with a lot of these things we see, like chronic pain, acute injury, things that really take people outside of their normal and challenge their mental health. So tonight I wanted to talk about some of those. So the first kind is really this acute depressed phase, right? When people have a new injury, especially athletes or people who really identify with their sport or physical activity, when they have this injury, it takes them away from being able to participate with their community, right? So for example, ultra runners, when they become injured, can no longer do their distance running. But it's not just their sport, it's the people they've spent time with. They can no longer engage in the activity they're used to doing with the community they're used to being with. It takes away from their image of self. Same with CrossFit athletes, same with bikers, any kind of sport there is. If you're an athlete and you're taken away from your sport, or if you are anyone who is injured who cannot do your functional tasks, it really does cut back in terms of how you feel about yourself. So I feel like there's an acute depression that goes along with injury that we see often in the clinic. And those patients who come into us are going to really have, a sense of loss of self-worth. They're going to be a little bit more down. They might be less hopeful or optimistic that their injury is going to heal. And these are going to be the patients that we're seeing all the time that are a little bit low level depression who don't necessarily associate themselves with depression or a mental health problem. Right? But we're going to start identifying some of these things that we see in the clinic because these patients are going to show up. They're going to have like a flatter affect. They're going to seem obviously a little bit sad, frustrated with their injury, uncertain about the future. So these are the patients that are kind of the easy ones, the easier ones. These are the people that most of us can relate to. Like most of us have had some form of injury that has kept us from doing what we want to do. So we can relate to them. We can tell them about our experience as long as we don't equate their experience with ours. We can help them to see that this is just a step in the path and they're going to get through it. But I think one of the key things is to really create that optimism, help people understand they're going to get back to their prior level of self if you believe that that is the case. And then be able to help provide some strategies, right? So people who are injured are not always going to go directly back to their sport. It may be a broken bone, it may be a torn something. Like there are lots of injuries that occur that don't allow people to go directly back to what they were doing prior to injury. So those people are going to be lacking that sense of self-worth that we were talking about. They're not going to be feeling like they're able to communicate that they're doing something in life that's worthwhile. So being able to strategize with these people and figure out a different source of that self-worth can be really, really valuable. Especially for athletes who are in a sport where they are likely to get injured again. It's good to be able to strategize with them and get them doing a different sport, cross-training, volunteering, finding some kind of different craft or thing they can do that allows them to be inside a different community and really be able to associate themselves with something that is not their sport and their sport only. I've definitely had a lot of ultra running patients who get really depressed when they can't run, when they can't participate in community. And that sucks up a lot of their time. Like when you are an ultra runner, you are spending 20 or more hours out on the trail every week. It's a lot of time that you spend with your friends and community that then you lack once you are injured. So being able to figure out something else that these patients can do that kind of provides them with that social interaction, provides them with that sense of accomplishment is really key. And even though this is a pretty simple concept, being able to just make patients aware of that and guide them towards something that's going to allow them to get through this injury in a better level is really, I think, a key piece of what we can provide as PTs for these patients. With the understanding, of course, that they're going to get through it and we can be optimistic, but also with the knowledge that if they have an injury in the future, they don't have to necessarily go down the road and become depressed or become sad or have the sense of like worthlessness, but that they can go directly into their newfound love, sport, activity, hobby, whatever it is, volunteerism, in order to avert that depressed phase. And I think it's really important that we catch people here in this acute phase because we prevent them from going into the more chronic phase of depression, which is really more difficult to draw yourself out of, which is the other side of things, right? So we are going to see patients who are more chronically depressed, what I would consider more of a psychological illness, right? Like depression is not just a thing that people become and they can't get out of. It is an illness. It's a mental health problem, and it's something that a lot of people are dealing with. It's not, just their issue or their fault or something they did wrong. Like this is something that is very real in life for a lot of people. Luckily, as a healthcare community, we are learning this and we are not shutting these people out. But I think that it's really important that we have some understanding of depression so that we can better treat these people, right? So one of the things that people say is like, how do I know? How do I know if patients are depressed? I mean, number one, a lot of us can identify some of those factors of like lack of affect, lack of energy, not really caring about things, seeming to be fatigued or tired all the time, not getting excited, not engaging, all those kind of classic things that identify depression. But honestly, the easy one for your patients who have been depressed for a good length of time or part of their lives, they're going to mark it on their intake form. And I know that sounds like a duh point, but they're going to mark it on their intake form. But that's not the end of the story, and I think that's the key. When a patient comes in and they mark depression on their intake form, it is not your job to page through that and just see it and put it in your head and think, okay, something totally foreign to me, I'm done with it. These patients, if they have a severe form of depression, if they have an active form of depression, that's going to affect their treatment. It's going to affect how well they do with some of your treatments, and it should help to kind of tailor their treatment and help you decide what's appropriate and what's not. But you can only decide that if you have more information, right? So when someone marks depression on their intake form, it is your job to go through and say, I see that you marked depression on your intake form. If you're comfortable, I'd like you to share a little bit more about that with me and how it affects your life. Now, I'm going to repeat that because I know that this is difficult, right? It's hard to talk to patients about depression. If you are not a psych professional, you're not trained to do this. But that's why I want us to talk about it. That's why I want all PTs to be good at these kind of things. Because the more comfortable we are with ourselves and with the words coming out of our mouths, the more comfortable our patients are to be able to share more with us so we understand their situation. So again, when your patient marks depression on the intake form on initial eval, don't gloss over it. Don't move through it like it didn't get marked. Say to the patient, I see that you marked depression on your intake form. If you're comfortable, I'd like you to share a little bit more about that with me and how it affects your life. That way, you get an understanding right off the bat whether this is an active form of depression or something they've dealt with cyclically. Is this something that's being medically managed already? Are they seeing a counselor? Is this something that keeps them from moving? Are we talking about depression that are keeping people in bed? They can't exercise, they can't be active, they can't do their normal thing. It doesn't really matter if their knee hurts, their doctor just wanted them to see you, but really they're not moving out of bed, so who really cares? Or is this a form of depression that they're managing, that is being dealt with, that they understand, that they know their triggers for, and they know what makes it go up and down. So it's like, it's really important that we get deeper in with these patients, that we figure out what depression means for them, because it's going to affect our level of care, and it's going to affect our understanding of how active they are during the day, right? Like, if we want our patients to become healthier, to become more active, to get moving, to really be energized adults, if we don't know that the reason they're not moving is because they're depressed, then we're missing the boat. And we don't want to miss the boat. We want to be on the ship, right? So we need to start asking more questions about things for our patients. Now, there are a lot of strategies around dealing with depression, and none of them is correct for everybody. There are tons of different pharmaceutical strategies. There are avenues that different doctors take. Many patients who are depressed are being treated by their primary care clinician, not necessarily a psychologist or psychiatrist. And a lot of the pharmaceutical management is really trial and error. Let's try this one drug. Let's give it 3 months. Let's see how you do. It's not always a direct hit, right? Like, this is not Battleship. This is kind of like, let's throw some things at it and see what happens. So a lot of patients are sort of in that weird interim of trying to figure out what's going to work for them, if something's going to work for them. And if you live in a place that is like Portland, Oregon, where a lot of patients are super adamant about not being on medication, then you're going to run into depression in its more active forms, where people are really doing their best to try to manage it, not pharmaceutically, but aren't always successful. So we need to be able to provide some more strategies, right? Now, number one, PTs are the gatekeepers to exercise. We cannot forget how important exercise is to mental health in general, depression, and across the board. So being able to educate our patients that not only is exercise good for whatever orthopedic or not problem they're coming to see us for, but exercise is a key management strategy for handling and dealing with depression. And while a lot of people who have depression know that already, it's still our job to bring it up. It's still our job to really show them and help convince them that this is a good strategy for managing their mental health, right? So we can't forget that. That's numero uno across the board. But number two, all of those general health and wellness things that we educate other patients on, sleep, stress management, healthy diet, all of those things totally run together when it comes to depression. So we need to be able to educate our chronically depressed patients on all of those aspects as well, and be able to just help them with some of those little bits that they may not think matter, but they can have a really big effect on their mental health and wellness, and if they feel like getting out of bed in the morning. So we need to help them with some of those strategies. The last thing that I want to talk about is with chronic depression, being able to help people get out of their ruts, right? Like, we know as PTs that patients, people in general, like, we all fall into patterns, for better and for worse. It's like, I can be in a great pattern for exercise and been doing all of my good workout stuff every day of the week and eating right and doing all those are all patterns, right? They're things that are habituated into my routine. But we can also fall into bad strategies, bad patterns, right? Like, we can get off the horse, we can not work out for 4 days, and then it's really hard to get back at it. Or we eat that one piece of pizza, and then it's like our diet goes out the window. All of these things are just patterns. So trying to work with our chronically depressed patients to sort of break their patterns, to figure out how it is that we can get them to get out of little pieces of the pattern, right? Because it didn't happen to them all at once. They probably, most people, didn't wake up one morning and were just super depressed, and then it was over and they couldn't get out of bed and they couldn't do normal exercise and they couldn't go to work and they couldn't make themselves healthy food. It happens over time, like these small changes that are kind of allowed to occur until the normative factor, the overlying thing, becomes depression. So we need to be able to pick those apart one by one, just like we would with any of our patients and their health strategies. We need to be able to say, hey, I'm going to provide you with a routine. And maybe that routine is that every morning you get out of bed at 9 and you do 10 minutes of breathing work, and maybe then you do 10 minutes of general exercise, walk your dog, do your PT exercises, ride a stationary bike, whatever they have access to. And then that's it. And maybe that's number one. But whatever it is, it has to be a strategy that breaks the cycle, that gets them into a pattern of being able to implement more control. And that's the key factor, right? When you're depressed, when you have a mental health illness, you're not in control. You don't feel like you can change a damn thing. So being able to give them a strategy to be in control, to be able to exercise and know that they will feel better, to be able to get up in the morning and make themselves a healthy breakfast, they will feel better. And once that cycle gets broken, once they're able to move into that new routine and new pattern, then you can start to expand it, right? Just like with all of our patients, we're not going to change their whole routine and their whole day all in one time. We're going to do little bits, slowly. So for some of these patients who have chronic depression, who have been just pharmaceutically managed and nothing else, whose doctors haven't given them strategies, I think it's a good place for us, right? We have patient trust. We have time with patients. We talk to them about their lives. We know them. And now we're going to ask more questions about depression when they mark it on their sheet. So we're really going to be the clinicians, the providers that patients come to trust. And so I really feel like it's our place as therapists to step up to this role and be able to give them something back. So I hope you guys got something out of this, but I encourage you, when you have patients who seem depressed or who mark depression on their intake form, don't be scared. Be a doctor. Step up. Ask questions. All right, guys, have a freaking lovely day, and I hope that everyone does well out there. See ya.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.